Revenge with Karen.
I don't know how else to say this, Michelle, but that promotion was never going to happen. That's what Greg said, flat, matter of fact, like he was reading my fate off a sticky note between sips of his cold brew. Not even a flinch. No eye contact either, just a little smirk that curled like old printer paper in a hot car. I didn't say anything, not at first. Just sat there in that glass fishbowl of a conference room, still holding the performance tracker I built, the one he demoed to the exec team last week like he coded it himself. My face was calm, probably even polite, but my brain was busy rerouting every ounce of heat and humiliation into a kind of numb calculation. We were 3 floors up in a building that smelled like industrial carpet and microwave popcorn. Outside the room, the new hire class was walking past, laughing about something someone posted in Slack. I'd onboarded most of them. I built the documentation they used. I created the systems that made their ramp up 10 times faster than it used to be. And inside that room, with one sentence, Greg made it clear I was invisible. Let me rewind. I've been at the company for 5 years. Started back when our headquarters was half a WeWork suite and the Wi-Fi crashed every time someone tried to upload a PDF. I was the second hire on the ops team. Job posting said logistics support, but in reality it meant fix the chaos, solve what no one else could, smile while doing it. I did. I mapped out cross-team workflows that no one had even thought to document. I rebuilt the contractor vetting process from scratch. I implemented our entire asset tracking system with no budget, no team, and no thanks, just results. The kind of backbone work that keeps a company from rotting from the inside. Nobody writes press releases about it. But without it, nothing moves. I never made noise, I never played politics. I assumed, stupidly, that the work would speak for itself, that someone would notice, that merit mattered more than bravado. Then came Jordan. Fresh out of his second startup, both of which folded quietly under NDAs and soft landings, he joined the company with a title 2 rungs higher than mine. Didn't know how to sort a pivot table. He knew how to talk, loudly, in meetings, at happy hour, on Slack about nothing. Within 2 months, I was assigned to collaborate with him on an initiative that, no surprise, looked exactly like one I'd proposed a year earlier. My name was scrubbed off the original roadmap. Jordan's deck had colorful flowcharts and 3 fonts too many. Greg clapped during the presentation. I mentored Jordan. I taught him our tooling, showed him where the bottlenecks were and how to fix them. I wrote the playbooks, trained the interns, handed him deliverables like they were birthday gifts wrapped in ribbon. He called me a rock star in public and overly sensitive in private. So when promotion season came around and I wasn't even shortlisted, I asked for a one-on-one with Greg. I had my notes, my numbers, and my recommendations ready. I didn't come to beg, I came to present my case, like any competent woman would in a company that said it valued data-driven growth. And that's when he hit me with it. That promotion was never going to happen, like I'd asked him to pass the salt, like he wasn't saying the quiet part out loud. Then he leaned back, laced his fingers behind his head, and added, "You're good, Michelle, you're solid, but leadership's looking for a different kind of energy. Different kind of energy. Not more qualified, not more experienced, just different." I could feel my pulse in my teeth, but I didn't crack. I thanked him for his time, stood up, and left. He didn't know it then, but he just pressed the ignition switch. The funny thing is, when people tell you you're not leadership material, what they're really saying is, you're too competent for me to control, and that terrifies me. So I went back to my desk. I closed all my dashboards, and I opened a new document, title Greg 2022 to present. I began typing, dates, incidents, names, and in the back of my mind, a quiet promise formed, I'll give them the paper trail they're so desperate to ignore. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but because someone needs to remember that we were here, that we built the damn thing, and we were never going to be quiet forever. The rot didn't start with Greg's smirk. It started long before that, just hadn't connected the moldy dots yet. First came the calendar games. Meetings I was supposed to lead were suddenly rescheduled for alignment, except no one told me. I'd open my laptop Monday morning to find invites yanked or moved to slots that overlapped with other critical work. When I asked about it, I got chirpy little lies. "Oh, thought you were looped in already. Jordan said he was covering for you." Right, covering with a Sharpie. Then it was Slack, threads about projects I architected, but somehow my name wasn't tagged. Jordan would start the convo, and magically Greg and a few others would chime in like he was Moses parting the productivity sea. Ideas I'd written out in Confluence weeks ago were being discussed like they were brand new. Jordan even started calling one of them his baby. I scrolled back through our old DMs one night. There it was, a screenshot I'd sent him explaining the exact workflow he was now pitching like a visionary. I didn't say anything, yet, because once you spot one crack, the whole wall starts talking. I found an old deck I'd submitted to Greg 6 months earlier, a strategy pitch for improving vendor onboarding. It was returned with no comment at the time, buried under "let's circle back" fluff. Now it was in Jordan's quarterly roadmap, word for word. Even used my original diagrams, just replaced the fonts, and slapped some neon-colored icons on top like it was a school project. The next blow came wrapped in digital static and IPA breath. It was a Thursday evening, and I was still at my desk cleaning up another one of Jordan's light-touch integrations that had nuked our invoice tagging logic. Slack pinged. Then Zoom auto-opened. Apparently I'd been added to a recurring ops social hour call by mistake. No one noticed me. No one checked the participant list. That's when I heard it. Greg laughing, drunk laughing, the kind that bends words like warm plastic. Someone had just made a joke about promotion PTSD, and he followed it up with, "Michelle, please. She's like an old Roomba, just keeps spinning in corners. You pat her head once a quarter, and she thinks it's a raise." Cue laughter. Jordan's voice joined in, adding, "She literally thanked me for feedback last week." Feedback I copy-pasted from your email, Greg. Greg, see? She mentors herself. That's leadership, right? More laughter. I sat there frozen, hand hovering over my mouse, heart drumming so loud I could barely hear the rest. I didn't leave the call. I didn't scream. I clicked record. 36 minutes. Saved. Labeled. Timestamped. Uploaded to a private drive only I could access. Next morning, I opened my inbox and found an unexpected gift. A misfiled thread in a shared folder Greg had forgotten to lock down. It was from February, 3 months before promotions were finalized. Subject, Michelle promotion track. Greg's reply, bold and blunt, buried halfway down, "We can't promote her. She's dead weight with a clipboard. Good at cleanup, but not the face we want. Let's fast-track Jordan, he's a better brand." Better brand. That's what I was to them. A function, a fixer, background software in human form. I didn't scream again. I forwarded the thread to myself. I saved it. Then I reopened my document, Greg 2022, to present and started a new section. Systemic minimization, evidence and escalation timeline. I logged the Zoom recording, the Slack erasure, the meeting reshuffles, the plagiarized deck. My rage didn't come out in flames, it crystallized. Cold, sharp, deliberate. They wanted someone polished. They wanted a brand. They wanted to pretend I didn't exist unless they needed the bleeding stopped. That was fine, because I was done being the emergency tourniquet they threw in a drawer after the bleeding stopped. I was going to build something else now, not for them, for the record. I became a digital archaeologist. Every forgotten Slack thread, every quick sync meeting, every condescending one-liner buried under faux professionalism. I started digging. Not out of spite, not yet, but because something in me snapped sideways when I saw my own projects listed under Greg's self-evaluation. Yeah, that happened. It was buried inside a PDF he'd attached to a shared folder meant for performance calibration. I wasn't even supposed to see it, but someone on the IT side accidentally granted too much access during a permission sync. One of those oops moments that usually gets ignored. Not this time. There it was. Greg's Q2 self-review, a masterpiece of half-truths and theft. The section labeled Strategic Innovation detailed my vendor logic overhaul, my automated reconciliation script, and even the intern mentorship pipeline I built out of sheer necessity after they slashed the onboarding budget. Each bullet point a ghost in his voice. Introduced scalable vendor intake flows, reduced onboarding time by 42%, rolled out automated reconciliation across finance and ops, piloted junior development program for incoming talent. I could feel the words trying to crawl back into my throat and scream. But I swallowed them. Again. Instead, I copied the file, saved it in my growing archive, gave it a new name. Greg Self-Review Attribution Theft PDF. By now, my evidence folder had folders, subfolders, labels, timestamps. There were screen recordings of Zoom calls where my audio was muted mid-sentence while Jordan rambled uninterrupted. There were Slack receipts showing me assigning tasks that magically got reassigned to someone else 2 days later, with Greg's thumbs-up emoji. Every correction Greg made on my work documents, I tracked the metadata. Most of the time, he just opened the file, moved a cell, resaved, and suddenly it was his revision. I built a timeline of those two, but I needed more than a mountain of receipts. I needed a compass. So I messaged someone I hadn't talked to in over a year, Samira from HR. We met during onboarding 5 years ago when the company still felt like a startup pretending to be a family. Used to run the culture committee before leadership quietly turned that into a Slack channel nobody reads. Last I'd heard, she'd been repositioned into compliance support, HR exile for people who asked too many good questions. I didn't message her through work channels. I sent her a text. Simple, me, hey, can I ask you something off record? Samira, if it's about Greg, I already have a folder. My spine tingled. We met for coffee in a park near her apartment. She didn't bring her work phone. She didn't wear her badge. And when I asked her quietly if this kind of thing had happened before, if I was overreacting or imagining the systemic tilt, she gave me a tired smile and said, "You're not even the third this year." According to Samira, there were 2 other women, one in product, one in Rev Ops, who'd both been passed over, undermined, and transitioned out after leadership branded them not a cultural fit, and had filed a complaint. The other signed an NDA and vanished. What happened to the complaint? I asked. She just shook her head. Legal buried it under DEI metrics and reorg noise. They made her feel like she was the problem. I nodded, quietly. But inside, something seismic shifted, because now I wasn't just collecting to protect myself. I was collecting for all of us. I was archiving the truth. I wasn't going to let it rot in a corporate graveyard of misunderstandings. After that, I started mapping the power grid. Who backed Greg? Who stayed silent? Who benefited from pretending not to notice? I reached out to people who had left recently, some burned out, some pushed out, some just disgusted. They told me things I already knew in my bones, that if you were quiet, female, over 40, or too competent without being loud about it, hit a ceiling made of someone else's ego. And still, I didn't act. Not yet. I kept smiling in meetings. I nodded when Jordan called himself a process ninja. I responded to Greg's nitpicks with thanks for the feedback, and continued collecting his fingerprints on every stolen task and manipulated doc. By the time performance review season rolled around again, I had compiled a full attribution matrix, a chart of who claimed credit for what, side by side with internal timestamps, authorship logs, and email chains proving otherwise. I gave it a name, Operational Ghosting, a case study in silent theft. I printed a hard copy and sealed it in an envelope at home, just in case. I wasn't building a revenge plan. I was building a mirror, one that was about to show the truth in terrifying, undeniable detail to the people who needed to see it most. And once that mirror was up, weren't going to like what stared back. There's a strange kind of clarity that comes once you accept the truth. No one's coming to save you. Not HR, not your manager, not the value statement framed in the lobby like a hostage note from integrity. It's just you, the receipts, and the silence between each Slack ping where you realize you've already crossed the line. And now there's only forward. I started building my network like I used to build workflows, quiet, intentional, with multiple redundancies. First was Renee, a former teammate who'd been offboarded during restructuring after Greg told leadership she had difficulty managing ambiguity. Translation: she asked too many questions about why Jordan kept getting headcount when we were supposedly in a freeze. Renee had nothing to lose now. She sent me her old performance reviews, glowing, consistent, and a few screenshots from her exit interview. One in particular stood out. A note from the HR interviewer saying she expresses concern about Greg's leadership style, but offers no concrete examples. She had examples. They just didn't want to hear them. Then came Yvonne and Priya, 2 women in compliance who rarely spoke during all hands, but tracked everything with a precision that made IRS auditors look sloppy. I'd worked with them during a procurement overhaul last year and remembered how they caught a 6-figure error Greg tried to pin on me. I invited them for a catch-up coffee on Zoom. 10 minutes in, Yvonne leaned forward and said, "You're not the first, but you might be the one with the receipts." They didn't ask for drama. They didn't promise a fix. But they offered context, timelines, precedents, kinds of internal policy language that only matters when someone with power decides to care. They showed me where previous complaints vanished. They pointed to the breadcrumb trail of voluntary exits that just so happened to follow Greg's leadership changes. Then there was Mark, quiet, methodical, and 2 desks down from Jordan. Mark didn't say much in meetings, but he saw everything, especially the day Greg tried to hang a missed deadline around my neck. That morning, Greg ambushed me in front of the team. "Michelle, didn't you promise to finalize the vendor risk matrix by last Friday?" I blinked. That deadline was next Friday. I opened the original brief, shared the screen, and highlighted the line, "Deliverable due, March 22." It was March 14. Greg gave a weak laugh. "Oh, must have misread it." But the damage was done, doubt planted, public perception warped by 5 seconds of contrived incompetence. After the meeting, Mark messaged me. "Mark, I saw what he did. I exported a timestamped copy of the shared doc last week. Let me know if you want it." Turns out, Mark had a habit of backing up shared docs just in case. I didn't ask why. I just said thank you and added the file to my archive. I was building a scaffolding, not to escape, but to pull the whole facade down when the moment came. And Greg started to twitch. He'd always been smug. Now he was paranoid. Started CCing himself on every task I was tagged in, even ones with no relevance to him. He'd drop into threads with phrases like, "Just want to ensure we're aligned," which is corporate for "I want credit" or scapegoat, depending on the outcome. He nitpicked formatting on internal memos. He questioned the tone of my JIRA comments. At one point, he scheduled a one and opened with, "Some people have been saying you're not as collaborative lately." I just nodded and said, "Interesting." "Who said that?" He blinked, shuffled his notes, and moved on. Meanwhile, Jordan started accidentally forwarding me his personal notes from meetings I wasn't invited to, all of which had my name in them. One even said, "Michelle likely won't support this plan. May need to loop in Greg first." I saved them all, replied to none. And then, the timing gift fell in my lap. During a cross-functional sync, someone from finance made a joke about the executive calendar being blocked off for IPO hygiene meetings. Most people didn't react, but Priya did. She messaged me later, "Priya, it's real, they're prepping. Could be announced this quarter. Greg's on the stakeholder list." Suddenly, everything snapped into sharper focus. An IPO meant visibility, public scrutiny. A scandal, even a whisper of retaliation, bias, or whistleblower suppression, could delay the process by months, maybe tank it entirely if it came with receipts. Greg wasn't just a bad boss now. He was a liability with a price tag attached. And I was holding the kind of documentation that makes lawyers lose sleep, so I updated my file names, cleaned the metadata, cross-referenced timestamps. I began building not just a folder, but a narrative. A story so airtight, so boringly factual, no one could twist it without tying themselves into a noose. I didn't rage. I didn't vent. I didn't scream into the void. I just kept working. The same way I always had. Only now, every step forward was another line in a deposition waiting to happen. The complaint was surgical. 38 pages, fully indexed. Timelines, supporting documents, internal policy excerpts, and footnotes like legal shrapnel. Not a single adjective. No rage, no drama. Just a quiet reckoning, formatted in 11-point Arial, ready to be filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. I didn't send it, not yet. Instead, I read it. Then I reread it out loud, because I needed to make sure it wasn't just cathartic, it had to be devastating. And it was. I saved the final draft under a deliberately boring file name, Q4 Workforce Analysis Draft V3, PDF. Uploaded it to a private, encrypted drive. Printed 2 hard copies. One went in a manila envelope inside my closet. The other I mailed to my sister's address across state lines, just in case. Then I made my real move, quiet, small, almost invisible. I filed an internal compliance report through the company's anonymous tip line. It was one of those third-party platforms with chirpy UI copy about fostering integrity, but I knew how they worked. They timestamped every report, archived IP addresses, and if you triggered the right keywords, retaliation, bias, protected activity, they escalated within 24 hours. I kept the wording clinical, objective, just enough to light a match near the powder keg without blowing the walls off. Multiple documented instances of attribution mismanagement and potential retaliation within ops leadership. Evidence available. Questing audit review of project ownership logs and performance calibration decisions, Q1, Q3. I clicked submit. I watched the loading spinner. Then the screen said, "Thank you for helping us build a better workplace." Sure, we're all building something. Then I waited 3 days. Silence. Then I overheard it in the break room of all places. Greg was standing with 2 other managers, nursing his 3rd Diet Coke of the morning like it owed him alimony. he said. See that compliance ticket? Somebody thinks they're deep throat. The others chuckled. One asked, any idea who? Greg shrugged, probably one of the bitter interns. I mean, come on, project ownership audits. That's a tantrum with a thesaurus. I didn't flinch. I walked in, grabbed my coffee pod, and nodded at him like he hadn't just laughed in the face of what was, effectively, his own obituary. Let him laugh. Let him dismiss it. Because while he was busy mocking the shadows, I'd already hired the flashlight. 3 weeks earlier, I'd contacted outside counsel, a firm specializing in employment law and corporate retaliation cases. Not the loud ones with billboards and jingles. The quiet kind. The kind that settles in 6 figures behind doors with soundproofing. The intake call was simple. I gave them the outline. They asked how much evidence I had. I said, enough to make the audit committee sweat. Assigned me a senior partner and looped in a media advisor. Because if the IPO did go public before this was handled, leverage. They drafted a statement, not for social media, not for a rage-fueled Glassdoor post. A press release, clean, boring, terrifying. An operations leader at company name, citing extensive documentation of internal discrimination, filed an EEOC complaint alleging retaliation and attribution theft within core revenue teams. The complaint, submitted alongside outside counsel and compliance exhibits, outlines potential conflicts that may affect the company's public filing disclosures. Not a threat, a contingency. I printed that too, put it in the same envelope with the hard copy complaint, labeled it only open if necessary, because this wasn't about going nuclear. Not yet. This was about pressure, about pacing, about making them think the water was still warm while it quietly reached boiling. Greg didn't know I'd already lined up statements from 2 former employees. He didn't know Priya had walked me through the company's pre-IPO risk disclosures and pointed to the clause that required immediate reporting of material leadership concerns. He didn't know that every time he mocked that anonymous ticket in Slack, I took a screenshot, thought I was still spinning in circles, waiting for someone to rescue me, but I wasn't. I was waiting for the moment the rope went taut. The email subject line was surgical in its vagueness. Performance support plan, initial review draft. Greg didn't even bother with a meeting invite. Just dropped it in my inbox like a live rat in a shoebox and waited for the scratching to start. Inside the doc, it was all coded language, opportunities for improvement, alignment gaps, collaboration concerns. Not a single metric. No project references. Just vague slaps dressed as concern. Buried halfway down, Michelle is encouraged to demonstrate proactive team-first communication behaviors. Translation: stop making us uncomfortable by being better at your job than the guys we promote. At the bottom, a signature line. Blank. Waiting. I stared at the document, jaw tight enough to crack a molar, then calmly minimized the window. Reply: I didn't forward it to legal. I didn't march into HR and demand an explanation. Not yet, because I needed them to walk into this trap on their own. HR, predictably, acted like Switzerland with a nervous breakdown. I requested a meeting to discuss the plan. They sent Kelly, our HRBP, who showed up with a frozen smile and a notepad she never actually wrote on. We understand Greg is trying to support your growth trajectory. She chirped like this wasn't the corporate version of sliding a blade between my ribs. I asked, point blank, what specific performance data supports this plan? Kelly blinked. It's more about interpersonal alignment. Based on what feedback, she hesitated, we've received. Impressions from leadership, impressions. I could have laughed if I hadn't already seen this movie. They wanted me to sign the plan, accept the paper trail, confirm their narrative. I took a slow breath. I looked directly at her and said it, not loudly, not dramatically, just with the kind of surgical calm that gets people to sit up straight. This response falls under protected activity. Under federal law, that sentence landed like a Molotov on a linen desk set. Kelly's pen finally moved. She didn't say much after that, just mumbled something about looping in legal for clarity and ended the meeting early. The next morning, I got a new invite. Listening session. People Ops VP, no context. No attendees listed. Just a calendar block with a soft gray label like they were trying not to wake the beast they'd just poked. I arrived early. The Zoom room was locked. When it opened, it was just me and Claire, our VP of People Ops. The same woman who hadn't spoken to me in over a year, but somehow found time to like every photo of Greg's dog on Slack. She didn't smile. Didn't even bother with small talk. She went straight to, Michelle, we want to hear your experience directly. I paused, then opened my shared screen, No more tests, no more hypotheticals. I opened a folder labeled EOC Package Final and clicked into the table of contents. I said, this was submitted on Monday. It includes documentation of retaliation, attribution theft, gender-based promotion bias, and collusion during calibration cycles. All of it is time-stamped. All of it has backups. She went pale. Just slightly, a half-inch drop in blood pressure visible only if you were watching. I was. I clicked into Exhibit 12, the Zoom happy hour recording where Greg called me a Roomba. Then Exhibit 17, Greg's self-evaluation with my work listed under his bullet points. I didn't need to say anything. The silence in the call did the screaming. Claire cleared her throat. Was this also shared externally? I've retained outside counsel, I replied. Advised me not to answer that yet. She blinked. I added casually, my counsel's name is on page 2 of the filing. So is the firm, you'll recognize them. They handled that CFO harassment case at Revelix last year. That part wasn't strictly necessary. But I was done playing nice. Claire shifted in her seat. Michelle, I want to assure you that we take this seriously. Then stop pretending Greg's behavior is ambiguous, I said, voice flat. Because my evidence isn't. Session ended 20 minutes later with vague promises and more note-taking. But I knew the shift had happened. The performance plan, never mentioned again. The next day, Greg canceled all our 1-1s. The day after that, legal pinged me with a request for optional clarification, which I declined. My complaint already was the clarification. I hadn't nuked the room. I just turned on the lights. They called it a rapid alignment. Greg knew the second he walked into that beige conference room it wasn't a meeting. It was a reckoning with bad lighting and no escape hatch. Claire was already seated, expression carved from stone. Next to her was Adam from legal, tapping a capped pen against a sealed folder like he was keeping rhythm with someone's heartbeat. There was a third chair empty. No laptop dock, no Slack window, just space for silence. Greg sat. Claire didn't greet him and ask about his weekend. She simply opened the folder, slid it across the table, and said, "Please review the attached exhibits. We'll discuss after." He opened it, started flipping. Slack logs, meeting recordings, timestamp document histories. A transcript from that now infamous Zoom happy hour, line for line, Greg's voice captured like a digital ghost. "Michelle, please. She's like an old Roomba, then she mentors herself." That's leadership, right? Greg's throat clicked, reached for his water but didn't drink. And then, the moment I'd waited for, he whispered, Is this the full paper trail?" Claire's reply was neutral but surgical. "It's what was provided. There may be more." He didn't ask again. Behind the soundproof walls, silence rang louder than any shouting ever could. It was the sound of a man realizing the ceiling above him was now glass, and someone had just started throwing stones from the penthouse. Kept him in that room for an hour. I wasn't invited, of course. I was upstairs, sipping cold coffee at my desk like nothing was burning. But Priya messaged me one word, delivered. I opened my inbox. Buried between vendor pings and budget questions was an unexpected calendar invite, Claire again. Title, Role Transition Planning Confidential. I clicked yes. That afternoon, I found out legal had escalated my case to the board's risk committee, not as a formality, as a liability alert. The IPO window had narrowed to months, and my EOC filing, if left unresolved, posed a material threat to their narrative of ethical growth leadership. Investor relations was now involved, not because they cared about fairness, but because headlines don't do nuance and IPO delays spook money. The company's internal Slack suddenly went dark on Greg. His name stopped appearing in threads. One by one, shared docs began losing his permissions. He wasn't fired, not publicly, that would have been too risky, but the silence around him became its own form of announcement. His Slack status changed to OOO permanently. His face disappeared from the org chart. No goodbye message. No transition note. He was erased like a formatting error. And still, I didn't gloat. I didn't send a snarky farewell. Didn't leak the story to industry gossip blogs. Even mention his name again. Because this wasn't about him anymore. This was about the system that let him wear my work like a rental suit while I was told to collaborate more. The HR team offered a promotion opportunity that came bundled with a vague NDA, a cash retention bonus, and a new title that sounded like someone had used a buzzword generator on shuffle. I told them I'd review it with counsel, but I wasn't finished because I still had leverage, still had timing, still had that sealed envelope with the press release draft in my closet and a quiet ping from Samira in HR that simply read, Board is nervous. They're asking how many more there might be. The answer? Enough. Enough to rewrite the narrative. And now, finally, I held the pen. The promotion opportunity came wrapped in a PDF with bullet points and beige language, like someone had tried to pad a gag order with bubble wrap. Subject: Internal Mobility Advancement Proposal for Strategic Role Realignment. What it actually said: take this hush package and stay put until the stock rings. They dangled a new title, Director of Cross-Functional Enablement, which meant absolutely nothing and everything at the same time. It came with a $35K retention incentive, a vague commitment to upgraded visibility, and a clause buried on page 6. By accepting this role, employee acknowledges resolution of prior concerns in good faith. That was the line, the soft erase. The let's pretend this was all just a little turbulence handshake. I didn't reply immediately. I read every sentence, every comma. Then I sent it to my lawyer, who replied 2 hours later with a single phrase, acceptable if rewritten as settlement, not bonus. So I sent back a marked-up version. Removed their weasel phrases, named the retention bonus as a one-time resolution settlement tied to workplace resolution and leadership misattribution. Struck the NDA clause and replaced it with mutual non-disparagement because I wasn't planning to talk, but I sure as hell wasn't going to let them spin. Added one line at the end: equity package to match average for existing directors in revenue impact roles, subject to standard post-IPO lockout. They didn't fight me on it. Doc came back signed within 24 hours. No edits, no comment. Just a new signature page from legal, a wiring confirmation for the settlement, and a note from Claire that read, looking forward to your continued impact. Right. Greg disappeared the same day. No Slack farewell. No all-staff announcement. Just gone. His calendar wiped. His permissions revoked. His name redacted from shared documents like he was a classified operation that had never existed. Jordan stopped mentioning him in meetings. Stopped mentioning anything, really. He'd started showing up late, camera off, voice brittle. I didn't ask why, I already knew. I kept my new title in my signature line but didn't use it. I declined the LinkedIn update. I didn't need the performative flourish. I had something better: leverage, silence, and shares. 2 months later, the IPO hit. Valuation came in just shy of projections, but strong enough for confetti. Everyone pretended to be surprised when Claire shouted out the operational excellence behind the scenes during the earnings call. I was in the room, off camera, watching. I didn't smile, I didn't frown. I just watched the screen, watched the ticker go live, and listened to the money start moving. Later that week, I got the equity statement. It wasn't flashy, but it was enough. Enough to justify what I'd endured. Enough to cover what they never could admit out loud. Enough to remind me this was never about vengeance. It was about being unghosted in plain sight. Now, when people ask, whatever happened to Greg, I just shrug. He's not a story, not anymore. He's just a blank calendar slot in a quarter I no longer need to explain. And I'm still here, just not the version they were banking on. The camera sweep was supposed to be symbolic, a slow pan across the operations floor during the post-IPO earnings call, catching smiling faces and authentic company culture for the investor sizzle reel. And for a second, that's all it was. Until the feed caught the far edge of conference room B, where I sat, half in frame, half forgotten, holding a black pen and a small smile. No name caption, no spotlight, just a flicker of my hand hovering over a folder laid out in front of me. The label, Compliance Timeline, 2022-2024. The camera didn't linger, never do, but it caught enough. Enough for anyone watching closely to wonder what kind of timeline needs 2 years and a highlighter. Enough for people in the know, the board, the risk team, legal, to swallow their coffee just a little harder. The CEO kept talking, polished, pleased, wearing a tone 3 shades too celebratory. We want to thank the resilient leaders who steered us through challenges this past year, who helped us emerge stronger, more unified, more values-driven. He didn't name names, he didn't have to. The team clapped. The chat lit up with emojis, the call wrapped, and I sat still, pen uncapped, drawing a small circle around a date on the timeline, not a threat, a reminder. Legacy isn't built on applause. It's built in the cracks between what they say and what actually happened. After the call, I shut my laptop and stood. No one came over, no backpats, no great jobs. They'd all learned quietly. Me space, or maybe respect, or maybe fear. The lines blur after a while. An hour later, as I was packing up to leave, I saw the email come in. From a junior associate in RevOps, one of the golden children Greg used to favor. The kind of kid who once sent me a calendar invite titled Process Alignment, Let's Pick Your Brain with No Shame. Subject line, no one else would have. Inside, I just wanted to say thank you. For everything you protected, for what you didn't let them bury, for showing me there's a way to survive here without becoming them. I'm staying because you did. I didn't reply. I just sat with it for a long moment. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop. Succession planning / inside it, a single blank document. Title, Operational Legacy Phase 1 because revenge burns out. Applause fades. But legacy, that lingers. And now I was building something that would outlive all of us. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.